Magnet?
The rabbit.
Mostly, there's a lot of stuff I remember.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just in time. Yesterday we talked at great length and from many angles about this issue, about the essential fact that what is happening here is completely different than it is possible to conceive of. And obviously that implies that what you think this is, what you think is going on here, what you think you are, what you think the world is wrong. It's not that. And it's not just a little wrong. It's drastically, utterly, completely wrong. Which turns out to be good news, because what this actually is an amazing condition which happens to be vastly superior to your wildest fantasies of what would be good and what would be nice. That it's fortunate that that happens to be the case. So the whole thrust of this yoga, the whole thrust of spirituality, is for you individually to discover that the way that this is so. Discover that what you think you are and what the world you think you live in doesn't actually exist as such, and what you actually are and what this actually is. Discover what that is, and then you will get to enjoy the implications of that condition, which, as I said, fortunately, turns out to be a pretty good deal, pretty spectacular with regards to what we had originally thought. So that's an overview. So, and we spoke loosely about very many aspects of this yesterday. We covered a lot of ground, and I was very contented with it. Today I'd like to go into much more detail about this exploration, because obviously the point of all this is it's not of much use to you unless you can actually make this discovery for yourself. I mean, it's a fascinating theory and it's wonderful notions, and you can sit down and speculate on how wonderful this all is, philosophically if you want, and that's fine. You're free to do so. But it's actually possible to discover firsthand, personally, up close and personal, the way that this actually is, the way that you actually are. And again, the implication of that is quite astounding. So, the fundamental principle in all of this, the whole thing that gets us in trouble, and the whole thing that is also the solution to the problem, is the nature of patterning. Now, experience shows up very highly patterned, apparently, right? All human theories about what's going on and what exists and the way that it exists is based upon theories of these patterns. So in the visual field, there's all sorts of colors and shapes and so on. These shapes have various degrees of apparent coherence, which enable one to identify apparent things. You can look and say, oh, this looks like a person, that looks like a clock, this looks like a floor, and so on and so forth. And so the theory that these objects actually exist is based upon these patterns appearing in your experience. If you didn't see these patterns, it would be Greek to you. It would be meaningless. It would be gobbledygook. If when you're a small child, you learn about turning these patterns into things. I mean, obviously, let's say it's a very small child. Once its senses have matured sufficiently to experience the sense fields with some clarity, sees all these patterns. But at first, it's just patterns of light, right? Perhaps, or whatever, patterns of sound, patterns of sensation. But there's an educational process and indoctrination, which of course we all went through, where, this is, I'm mommy, this is daddy, You know, this is your teddy bear, this is your crib, you know, you're a little junior, this is this is that. And so the child is indoctrinated, is trained how to take these patterns and abstract them as particular entities, particular things or objects. And the implication of that is that these objects actually exist in the objective world, and all very well and good. All of which, the logical development of all of which, leads to what we're all familiar with as more or less consensus human reality. You know, if you ask your average person on the street, I mean, you know, people obviously diverge very, very radically in their mindsets. But I would say probably the average person on the street thinks that the objective world exists, thinks that there are other people, thinks that objects exist, thinks that there's cause and effect, you know, thinks that, you know, all these various aspects of this implication of the theories being drawn from the apparent existence and apparent behavior of all these patterns, right? So patterning is really at the crux, is really the crux of the issue, because that's the basis for the whole theory. You know, suppose your experience was just, you know, like snow on an old-fashioned TV screen that wasn't getting a signal, or like static, or like white noise. What would your idea of what was going on be? Suppose it was just nonstop snow. I mean, would there be things? Would there be a world? Would there be you? There would just be this weird noise, right? So it's the patterns that are the basis for all of the theorizing, all of the worldview, you know, that is held in imagination. Now, this is an important aspect. Patterns appear in experience, but they do not have a label on them. They do not have a caption. They do not have an explanation. The explanation is supplied in the imagination through training. The world is not telling you it's an objective world. It's just a pattern appearing in your various sense fields. But, you know, you've been trained to think of it that way and trained to hold that in your imagination, which is fine, which is one thing. But then, and here's the real whammy. You forget that you're imagining it. You forget that it's a theory. You forget that it's a hypothesis, and you fall into just the assumption that it's just true. It is, of course, it's an objective world. Anyone that says it's not an objective world is completely nuts. You know, it's undeniable. It's obvious it's an objective world. Here it is. Look and see, right? And that point of view is probably pretty obvious to most people, because that's the consensus reality point of view, and it's held to be true. And most people probably aren't aware that that's actually being actively held as a notion in the imagination. And if it wasn't being held in the imagination, it wouldn't exist. In other words, it's being created and maintained as a concept in the imagination. So that the objective world is objective and is an obvious thing is something that one has created and one actively maintains and feeds. For example, you go to the hospital and they hit you hard with a general anesthetic or something, and you're just gone. Where's the objective world then? You know, you're not supplying that information. You're not supplying that notion, so it's nowhere to be found until you put it there again. And then when you sober up sufficiently to, I mean, first it's just like all these colors and shapes and sensations, and wow, you know, you're just stoned out. And then when you recover sufficiently to have some functionality, then the imagination can have sufficient coherence to re-erect this. And then, oh, there's the world. Look, I'm coming out of it, you know. And the notion is that you're coming back to something that's actually there, rather than that you are functional enough to be able to create it as being there in your own imagination. Now, it's important to understand this. It's important to come to see this for yourself. Because the only objective actualities of the patterning and the implications of the patterning are all imaginary. And okay, we know this again. I talked, several times yesterday. I touched on the dream analogy. Dreams is an issue. We all know this very well from dreams. In dreams, there's nothing present but patterning. How could there be? There's no bodies. There's no worlds. There's no environment. There's no things. You're asleep in bed or whatever. Where would they be? You'd be awfully crowded out of your bed if you had the Grand Canyon in there with you, right? So in a dream, all there is patterns showing up in the dreaming, fantasy, dreamscape, whatever that is. Who cares? So all of these patternings are there, and when you fall into the dream and start inhabiting it credulously, when you start believing, wait a minute, I'm walking down the street and there's some people over there and they want to talk to me. Let me see what they have to say. They seem agitated, and all of a sudden you're off and running and you're doing the dream. You're inhabiting the dream, living the dream life. But the only thing that's actually there is patterns. What animates them and what turns it into an actual world and actual beings and actual things and actual interaction and cause and effect is the spontaneously present imaginative interpretation that is supplied effortlessly by the intelligence, effortlessly by consciousness. So there's, and within experience, there's always, you can think of it as two layers. There's the one layer of the objective presence of experiential patterning, and there's the other layer of interpretation of that pattern, which may or may be held loosely hypothetically, or more typically, finds itself unconsciously being accepted as true, and it's no longer being acknowledged as being essentially a fantasy or a hypothesis or a possibility, but it's just held to be a felt certainty. And of course, it's very subtle and complex because these interpretations are themselves patterns. So the interrelationship of all this is very strange and unfathomable, but that's not of particular importance at this point. At this point, the important issue is that experiential qualities show up as patterns. Okay, and this shouldn't need a whole lot of explanation. It's very, very obvious, I suppose, that your sense fields are full of. I mean, you hear your sense field is not just you hear these words, you hear the fans, you hear someone puts a glass down, you hear a clunk, you hear these things which are they're not plain vanilla sound. It's specific patterns. The sound shows up in chunks. It shows up in modules that seem to have, or that the perceiving intelligence can parse as having some degree of recognizable discretion. You can separate the sound of my voice from the sound of the fan, and so on, right? Or you think you can. But the point is that it is patterned. There are patterns, and then based on the pattern, so in your field of hearing, you're hearing these words, which is just sound showing up. It's just patterns of sound. It's gibberish. It may as well be like wind in the leaves or birds singing or whatever, water flowing. It's just a noise, and yet your consciousness can effortlessly take these patterns and say, oh, he's talking about this, he's talking about that, and generate a whole elaborate fantasy in your imagination that exists on the layer of interpretation. So on the one hand, there's the existence of the actual patterns of these words that are appearing within your sense field of hearing, right? So that's happening. And then simultaneously with that, or let's say closely related with that, there is this subsequent layer, so to speak, of interpretation where these patterns, the consciousness spontaneously and effortlessly says, oh, there's patterns of sound here. Wait a minute, that sounds like language. It sounds like words. If it's words, it's the language I recognize. Yes, it sounds like English, and blah, 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 so on and so on. I mean, obviously, you don't have to go through this consciously. You can just bang, because you're sharp. You have some hella functioning intelligence in there going on. So the intelligence, instantly hears sound, tells itself, oh, that's language. It's words. I understand these words. So it's language. Maybe something's being said that's of some interest. Let me follow these words and see if I see what I imagine they refer to, what I imagine they mean. And so then the second layer of interpretation becomes appears within your imagination, and all of a sudden you're sitting enjoying a conversation or enjoying a monologue or whatever, or you're bored stiff or not enjoying it, whatever. That's another aspect of the interpretation. But so the important point here is there's these two layers. There's the patterns and there's the interpretation. Now, aside from the fact that the interpretations are patterns, the patterns are essentially meaningless. It's the interpretation that supplies meaning. Patterns have quality. They have incredible richness of flavor, but they don't have meaning. You know, when you bite into some delicious food that you love, it's delicious, it's yummy, it's rich, but there's no meaning. It's just this amazing explosion of wildness, of like, wow. And the same, you see light, you see color. It's like there's an incredible richness. I mean, I look at Fritz's shirt and it's like, wow, what a blue. I mean, that's just, I could just go swimming around in that all day. You know, it's yummy, it's rich, it's full, but it doesn't mean anything. You know, it's not about anything. It's just, it's a flavor that is incredible. It's a flavor of experiential, let's call it an experiential flavor, an experiential characteristic, whatever. I mean, we can make up words. That is present, that the consciousness is engaged with spontaneously by the very fact of the pattern appearing. As soon as you see it, as soon as that color is seen, all of this is just intrinsic in that. All the richness and the yumminess of that just poof, it just appears. And then there may be a layer of interpretation of, oh, that's Fritz's shirt, and oh, you know, I don't particularly like the style of it, or I really love the fashion statement, or whatever, right? So all of that layer might happen subsequently. But again, that's a separate layer, and none of that is intrinsic in the actual apparition of the pattern itself. So patterns appear, patterns are pregnant with quality, but no meaning. So all experience consists of actually is just patterns. So that's very interesting. Why is experience patterns? Why does it show up as patterns? Why isn't it just whatever, nothing, or plain vanilla, or you know, white field, or snow, or noise? You know, why is it so intensely patterned? Well, who knows? Can't answer that question. But it is the case that this is experience finds this across the board. Anywhere you look within experience, you find patterning. The radiance, what shows up as patterning is what I call the radiance, the substance, the energy, whatever, whether it's an abstraction or an actuality is irrelevant. But what is showing up to constitute as these patterns, I call the radiance. And it's the nature of the radiance to show up as in infinite degrees of patterning. Always does, who knows? So that's interesting. But even more interesting is there's nothing but patterns of radiance. It's just patterns. Patterns here, you go to sleep, there's patterns, subtle patterns. You know, you drift off, you're not dreaming, it's just like, who knows what, amorphous, whatever. You know, but it's still subtle patterns. It's never nothing, right? You start dreaming and there's more patterns. You know, the dream fades and you drift off to sleep, more patterns. You wake up and all of a sudden patterns. And the patterns have different degrees of coherence. Waking sensory patterns, perhaps, arguably, have a different degree of apparent coherence than deep sleep patterns, let's say, maybe, or different quality, we can say globally in some sense. but it's not more or less patterning. It's just a different overall sort of a global flavor. And then you start dreaming, and again, different sort of a global flavor. And dream patterning could be said to have maybe a different degree of a different flavor of patterning, different quality of global patterning than waking patterns, or not, who knows. It's unimportant to try to parse this, but the important point is it's all just patterns. You go to sleep, and the difference between waking and sleeping is zero, except that the texture of the pattern seems to shift. Nothing has really changed. You know, you go unconscious. Say you're in the hospital and they're putting you out for surgery or something. I mean, you're gone. It never goes to nothing. It may get very subtle, right? It may get, and this is, I mean, this, you can play with this and explore it if you find yourself in that kind of a situation. You know, when you're totally out, when they put you out for surgery or something, it's not a non-existence. It's very interesting, but it is. It gets very subtle. It gets to be, you know, just words can't possibly go there. But it's not nothing, and there is patterning. There's always patterning. There's always something. It's never nothing. It's never a nothing. So there's all of these patterns that are continually shifting. So, what's the nature of these patterns? First of all, they're instantaneous. They only exist in the instant, right? Your experience, what you experience, is always now. You never experience a then. If you do experience a then in your memory, you experience that memory now. So patterns are always instantaneous. The very nature of patterns, it defines time. Patterns are here, patterns are now. There is no here or now other than patterns. When patterns appear, it's here and it's now. Another interesting aspect of patterns is they're absolutely unstable. They have zero persistence. Nothing experientially appears the same in the next instant. Never, ever. There's no stasis. There's no continuity. There's no duration. Patterns are like imagine, you know how movies, like in a movie, there's individual pictures, and each picture is different than the picture before it. Imagine that, only the pictures are of essentially in zero duration. There's a bazillion, squadillion of them every nanosecond, but they're all different. They're all different. So the present moment, the patterns that present in the present moment are only, they're there for zero duration. They're already, when they appear, they're already different. It's not like they appear and they're sort of here for a while and then they morph. As soon as they appear, they're already something else. It's that fast. It's faster than fast. So change is, apparition is change. As soon as a pattern appears, it is already something else. Which is, you know, how can you imagine that? It's inconceivable. It's illogical. But look at it. Look for yourself at all of this stuff. So one interesting thing about patterns is they're instantaneous. Another is they have absolutely no duration or permanence. And another is they never repeat. You never experience exactly the same pattern again. What you're experiencing now, every single aspect of it, you've never experienced it before, and you're never going to experience it again. Ever. Not even the tiniest piece of it. You could spend all of your life, you could live a long life, you could live 90 years and spend all of it in one room with nothing ever changing in that room, nothing coming in, nothing going out. And still, every instant of your experience would be absolutely unique and would not repeat ever. Because the change can be very subtle. I mean, you can be sitting looking at a wall for an hour and you're not really moving, and the wall's obviously not really moving, unless you're a physicist and you start looking up close at the oscillation of the molecules and what have you. But you can do that if you know. But anyway, so the wall's there and you're there, but there's micro shifts, you know, which you see the light from a different angle. There's changes in your mood. There's changes in your, the blood flow in your eye. I mean, who knows what, right? But everything's changing all the time. And so even if the uniqueness, even if in the next instant it looks almost exactly like it looked in the last instant, it's still completely different. And this is an important aspect of the principles of the patterning. It has, it's instantaneous. It has no duration. It has no repetition. So it's a continual flux. It's like a stream flowing by, which will never come again. And this is an obvious image of the flow of time, the flow of events in time that we're all familiar with, used poetically and such. But you can look very precisely with great precision at the way that this is so, and really get a sense of that these are just patterns appearing the way that they do. Okay, so all of this has just been a preamble. Now comes the important part. There aren't really any patterns. The patterns are actually unpatterned. And right there, right here, we're at the crossroads. This right here is the whole spiritual issue. This is it right here. The nature of the apparent patterns is actually unpatterned. That is what realization consists of. That is what liberation consists of. That is what freedom from karma consists of. Karma is all the patterning of one's life that one is stuck in. I'm Peter Brown. I live in, I'm not, Jose Marti. I don't live in, in a penthouse in Ecuador. I'm Peter Brown and I live in California. In other words, the specifics, all the details of your life could be said to be your karma, the overall pattern of things. And the fundamental human problem is we're stuck in our patterns. I'm stuck being Peter Brown. I'd love to be Brad Pitt maybe, or whoever, right? But I'm not. Why aren't I? Why do I have to be this schmo? Why do I have to put up with this crap that shows up in my life? Why does it show up in my life? Why can't I just all of a sudden be different? But it doesn't seem to work like that, does it? So we seem to be stuck in the patternings of our life, in the patternings of our circumstances. And that's the fundamental spiritual conundrum. So spirituality and yoga has rightly been described as a way to discover freedom from karma. Liberation is liberation from karma, cessation of karma. And it is exactly that. But the way in which it does that is interesting, and it's very subtle. It doesn't do that by magically erasing the patterning and you get to redraw it how you like. It's like all of a sudden, okay, it's not California. Now I'm a British lord and I live in 1920 in a castle. It doesn't work like that. You don't get to just sort of re-erase it. Maybe, if you can swing it, have at it. But it doesn't seem to work that way for me, okay? So, but the way it works is, the problem is, okay, I'm stuck being Peter Brown, embedded in the details of this patterning. Here's the rub. You discovered you're not really in the patterning, because the patterning doesn't actually exist. Remember the layer of patterning and the layer of interpretation? Okay. The patterning is largely hearsay. The patterns, no pattern can be precisely resolved as to exactly what it is. There is an imprecision, there is a fuzziness, there is an infinity, there is an intrinsic unresolvability to patterning. So patterning presents as if it was patterning, but when you examine any pattern, you can't pin down, you can't verify that it actually is patterning because it doesn't resolve into coherence. It doesn't resolve into precisely this. For example, let's take a number line. You all know number line in mathematics, right? So it's like a ruler. It's a line, and here's this point is 1, this point is 2, this point is 3. So this point is exactly 2. Okay, but wait a minute. No, this particular point, it's almost 2, but it's a little bit to the right of 2. Okay, so it's 2.001. No, no, it's a little bit to the left of 2.0. Okay, so it's 2.001, whatever. So exactly where is the point on the line? You can never say. Because as soon as you go to it, you find that some places it's actually a little bit to the left of it, some places it's actually a little bit to the right of it. And so unless you simply define it as being something, which is a layer of interpretation that has nothing to do with patterning, it's an open question what it actually is. It's pretty close to 1, but it's not 1. So it isn't 1. So I'm pretty close to being Peter Brown. But if I try and pin down what is Peter Brown, Peter Brown's the same thing. He's like, well, it's almost, it's pretty much like that, but it's not really. It's a little bit more here. And, this may be a clumsy example, but in actual fact, you go looking and you never get to an end of your search when you try and pin down a pattern. Never. Okay, here is the magic secret. Here is the magic formula of liberation. Patterns don't resolve. A pattern can only be a specific pattern if it resolves to being that specifically. No pattern actually resolves. Every pattern seems to be a certain way if you look at it superficially. But you look at it a little closer, it's like, I had it, it's kind of like that, but I had it a little off. It's a little more like this. And then you look at the little more like this, and no, it's not even really, it's sort of a little more. And I mean, I'll explore this and put it in very many different ways over the course of this morning. But this is a never-ending process. You can never pin down what a pattern is, because it's most precise. It's most specifically the way it is if you don't look too closely. The closer you look, the more you find out, and the more you find out, the more it diverges from what you thought at first. So, any way you think anything is, the way you think you are, the way you think your life is, the way you think your world is like that. It's a pattern that's not being examined too closely. You look at it closer, and all of a sudden, no, it's a little bit different than that. Okay, cool. So you look closer at that, a little bit different. No, it's a little bit different than that, too. So, okay, cool. And the closer you look, it keeps getting different. And so where do you end up? You're certainly departing from where you started from. It's not what you thought it was. It's different than that. But it's different than that, too. And it's different than that. And it's different than that. And you know what? It's always different. You never get to, oh, now I know what it is. Finally, I figured out what this damn pattern is. It's always, well, it's almost not quite. It always diverges from how you're trying to resolve it to be. You can never resolve patterns. I can't emphasize this strongly enough. This is physics. It's not just philosophy. It's not just the science of perception. It's not just psychology. This is actually physics. Physicists find this exact same thing. Physicists in this, whenever in the 1600s, it's like, well, we have these elements and we have this matter out there and it's just sitting there and we have, whatever. And then the chemists come along and we have the periodic table of the elements. And then some pesky guys start looking closer and they just go, wow, these elements are made of atoms. Oh my God. They're still, this is still this, but it's really elements, and the elements are really atoms, and the atoms are really subatomic particles, and the subatomic particles are really quarks, and who knows what the quarks are going to turn out to really be. There's no end of the line. You're going to look at that closer, and that's going to go somewhere else, and they're going to look at that closer, and it's going to go somewhere else forever. This didn't go anywhere. It still is what it is, but what is it? What is it? Is it metal and plastic? Is it atoms? Is it quarks? Is it string probability fields? I mean, what is it really? You cannot say. this is not just philosophy. This is not just sophistry. This is not just argument. Physicists, this is what they work with. This is what they deal with. You ask a physicist what matter or energy is, he says, I can't possibly tell you. I can describe it a lot. I can tell you a lot about it, you know, in terms of how it behaves, in terms of various control conditions and so on and so forth. But it's a big question mark, because it's a pattern that at one point, if you don't look very closely, well, it's just stuff, it's just matter, you know, just solids, liquids, and gases. Okay, cool. So everything's a solid, liquids. And then you look closer, and well, it's not quite that. It's a little bit different. And you look closer, so you see the pattern here. And this doesn't negate, this doesn't cancel out anything. So this is an interesting aspect of the patterning. This is this, whether it's, you know, whether it's plastic and metal, or whether it's atoms, or whether it's quarks, or whether it's probability fields, or whether it's a thought in the mind of God. It doesn't change the pattern, but the pattern is, what the pattern is completely mysterious. This is mystery. And we'll get to discussion in a little while. So, you know, I'm going to revisit this point again and again, because this is really the crux of the issue. Experience appears as intensely patterned, and none of the patterns are actually particular patterns, because they aren't what they seem to be. When you look closer, they deviate, and they ultimately deviate continually. So all you find is deviance. You never find, it doesn't come into coherence. Now the fantasy of a resolving pattern would be, here's a pattern, and the closer you look at it, the more you know what it is. So the closer you study it, the more precisely, the more it comes together into wholeness and coherence. And that's the naive fantasy of an objective world. You know, things are what they are. Well, it's kind of vague. At first glance, you don't really know. So you study it, you look closer, and then you get what it really is. And then you keep looking, and you know more and more about it, and it all comes together into a more and more precise thing. You really get it down. Now I know just what this is. But the way actual patterns work is exactly the opposite of that, which is fucking weird. It's counterintuitive. It goes against human logic. Things are most coherent, they are most solid, they have identity the most, the less closer you study them. The more you look into them, the more complex they become, the more subtle they become, the more multi-dimensional they become, the more aspects you discover there that you didn't notice at first, and that goes on infinitely. You look closer and closer, and you find more and more. And you look closer at the more and more, and you find more and more. And you look closer at that more and more, and you find more and more. Forever, forever, forever. So, and you know, you can look at this with people. I mean, you know, you meet someone, and it's like you get a hit on what they're like, and okay, yeah, I know, I sort of know what they're like. You get a flavor, and just sort of a hit on their, you know, their sort of temperament or whatever. But then but then what are they really like? What's really going on there? So you hang out with them, and you talk, and you are in different situations with them, and you watch their behavior, and it's like, wow, I wouldn't have guessed that about you, you know, and this and that, and the people open up and acquire dimension and get richer and richer. Are you ever going to get to the end? You ever going to know who they are? Is there a who they are, or is it just a continually expanding cloud of qualities? In each of those qualities, you can investigate that, and that itself becomes a continually expanding cloud of qualities. So I trust by now you're getting the notion of this. So let's apply this to the spiritual problems. The fundamental spiritual problem is, gosh, I'm me, and I'm stuck in the specifics of my life, so I don't have freedom. You know, I can't fly. I'm not filthy rich. You know, I'm not young and beautiful and sexy. I'm not whatever. Fill in the blank. I'm not ... And so the problem is I'm stuck in this. But I'm not really stuck in this, because none of this actually exists as this. And again, this is not just philosophy, this is not just argument. Experientially, these conditions cannot be found in the way that I suppose they are. So I'm not actually stuck in what I think I'm stuck in. And then I can look at the I that is stuck. And again, we find the same thing. You know, I is a delightful thing. You look at I and it's like, oh, I, me, you know, Peter, who I am, you know, who's sitting here. This guy with all these attitudes and opinions and stuff, right? I is completely obvious, but is it? And again, you start going in search of this I, and you discover, of course, exactly the same phenomenon, because it's just another pattern, and it does not resolve. You never find an I. You know, it's just a sea of innuendo that seems to be a certain way at first superficially, and you look closer, and no, it's not really like that. It's not quite that. And you look closer still, no, it's not even that. And you're off and running forever. You're just falling into infinity. When you look into any pattern and try and find what it actually is, you fall into infinity. And that's where you are. That's what you are, falling into infinity. That's what all these patterns are, falling into infinity. There are no patterns, because they seem to be patterns, but they don't actually resolve into actually being patterns because they cannot be found. They're not negated. This is this, but what is it? What is it when I go to sleep? What is it when I'm dead? What is it before I ever saw it? What is it now? There's no answer to any of those questions because it's not anything. It can't be found. It can't be pinned down what it is. It's not negated, but it's not anything. It's literally not anything. So, some of this may seem like an abstraction. The important point is you personally can look into this for yourself. You can do the math. You can look at your experience, look at anything that actually seems to be something, and you think you have a hit on what it is. And remember, there's a pattern, and then there's a layer of interpretation. So the first hurdle in any experiential investigation is to discriminate that, to get to the pattern itself, because the interpretation will tend to exist in fantasy, so it's impermeable. It's held like it's an article of faith. It's like if you go up to a fanatic and criticize their religion or something, they won't even hear you. So there's no point. There's no traction there because that's just a given, and you can't challenge givens. So the first thing is to separate the actual experience of the experiential pattern that's showing up in some sense field, or in the sense field in the mind, or in the sense field of the imagination, or whatever. Separate that from the layer of interpretation of what it is, so that you can just be with the pattern. You can also do this with interpretation itself as a pattern, but that's typically a little harder. It's more for an advanced investigation. So at any rate, so let me give you an example. So I'm picking this up, and it's my phone. It's a phone. It's an iPhone. Yeah, okay, cool. So iPhone interpretation, phone interpretation. What is the pattern? It's colors and shapes, let's say, in my field of vision. It's, sensation of, it can be described variously, temperature and certain tingles in the sense of touch. There's no presence in this field of sound at present. There's no presence that I'm aware of significantly in the field of smell or taste. In the field of mind, well, there's a lot of presence. All of a sudden, the interpretation's there. It's a phone. It's an Apple iPhone. It's my phone. It's well, I remember this about all that. The whole constellation shows up. But that's just more patterning in that dimension. Now, as we discovered in our exploration yesterday, all of these sensory dimensions don't impinge on each other. So the fact that this is present in the field of vision, and simultaneously there's information present, the same similar patterning in the field of touch, but nothing in the field of smell, let's say, is okay. That's interesting. So I'm looking at essentially two patterns. A pattern in the field of vision and a pattern in the field of touch. So you can sort of isolate it. So what is this as a pattern? Oh, it started vibrating. See, all of a sudden it's a whole different thing. Thanks for that. So in the field of vision, it is what? So, okay, first glance, it's a, and I'm describing it verbally, which is absolutely not the point, but it helps sort of walk you through the exercise. So it's a rough rectangle with, glints on the edges and whatever, right? I mean, whatever it is. So it's that. Then I look more closely at the shape. I look more closely at the color. Well, the color, it's black. No, it's not black. It's all sorts of shades of gray with gradations. And I look at the colors more, and I discover even more subtlety. And I look at the shape more, and I discover even more subtlety. I look at the reflections of light or the quality of light, I notice even more subtlety. And then I can pursue any or all of those details, and again, it just keeps going. It keeps going. And I never lose this, but this turns out not to be this. This turns out to be all of that, never-endingly, bottomless. So there's no end to the experience of this. And not in the abstract. I mean, this is actual concrete experiential quality. Now, typically we don't bother. Typically, the normal mode is to take things on you take a superficial hit. You take a quick snapshot, a rough sketch. Oh, I'm in a room with a bunch of people. You don't go into the details of that particular glint of light at this particular moment on that particular length of your necklace, right? I mean, unless you're stoned or something. Most people don't bother, right? We do these rough sketches, which is actually very convenient for our interpretive framework, because nothing shows up that's very challenging. Right? It's like, oh, I'm in a room at a talk, and you people are sitting here. It's like very simple. Okay, cool, I can deal with that. But all of a sudden, if it's just all of these weird bottomless colors and lights and shapes and qualities, it's like, you're just, where are you? And that's the point. You cannot answer the question where you are. And if you can't say where you are, how can you be stuck in karma? So anyway, so this is a very rough, very rough playing with this notion of personal discovery of how infinitely, and I mean not metaphorically infinitely, but literally fucking infinitely detailed patterns are. They just go on and on and on and on and on forever, literally forever. And this is all you're experiencing, is this infinity. So you're experiencing infinity. How can you possibly pretend to know what it is? How can you possibly pretend to have a handle on it and to be stuck in it? And I'll tell you how. By not letting yourself notice that it's an infinity and pretending it's just a bunch of people in a room. You dumb it down, you simplify it, you create a caricature of it, and then that's what you're relating to. You have a caricature of yourself, a caricature of the situation, and a caricature of the chain of events. And, we had a talk today and it was pretty good. I sat in the room and talked to a bunch of people and I got tired and went to home. It's like, is that really the truth of my experience? My experience is a field of constantly unfolding infinity that is absolutely undescribable. That's the truth. That's the literal truth. That's the concrete truth. And when that's your concrete truth, what's your life? What are you stuck in? What are you? And the point of all this is not philosophy. This is not theory. This is not abstraction. This is not sophistry. I invite you, look within your own experience, play with this stuff. You don't have to have faith in it. It's not delicate. Try and disprove it. Try and say, no, screw this. This guy's full of shit. Patterns are resolvable. I'm going to find out exactly what everything is. Okay, do that. Have at it. But the point is, rather than just lazily sitting in your current version of things, And you're free to do that too. That's cool. I mean, you know, if you're happy there, hey, have at it. I'm like, more power to you. But if there's anything that is at all less than perfection, less than ecstatic, less than divine, I invite you to look at what's really there, and you will discover ultimately, if you apply sincerity, intelligence, and intimacy to your investigation, you will discover that there's no you stuck in anything, there's no problematic conditions, there's an inconceivable transcendental condition that is actual, that is concrete, that alone exists, that alone is actually the case. And that's what this is, and that's what you are. I rest my case. You had a question? I don't know if it's still relevant.
No, just when you're describing this continually expanding patterns and the falling into infinity, I just saw the fractals.
Yeah, exactly, gotcha. Experience is fractal. Yeah, yeah, exactly that. I mean, fractal, it's wonderful that we have fractals now, and it's wonderful that we have computers that can convey fractals in their detail, show how bottomless they are. In fact, what we're talking about is essentially fractals. A fractal looks like something at a certain scale of observation. You look closer, and what it looked like before just completely disappears and it looks like something else. You look closer at that, and that completely disappears and looks like something else. Forever. No bottom, no final version, no end. And experience is literally that. Experience is fractal. But not just like fractal or fractal in a poetic sense. It is literally, concretely fractal. And this is directly experienceable. In fact, nothing but that is directly experienceable, which is wonderful from the point of view of this yoga, because you can prove it for yourself. You can do the math. You can look and see, and you don't have to accept anything on faith. You don't have to, you know, you can look and it'll show you what it is. You know, and the greatest impediment to looking is most of us, we think we already know what it is. We're settled in our interpretive framework, which exists in our imagination. We don't realize it's in our imagination. We think it's objectively true, and so we don't question it. And what's worse is we defend it. We think of it as our safety, and we think of anyone who does question it as our enemy or as a whacker, which is a wonderful way of being stuck in that, which is purely imaginary. So you're not, even then, you're not really stuck in anything, even if you feel like it.
So I'm sitting here attempting to apply what you're saying. And as I mentioned to you privately yesterday, the process roots in my back, the screw is out, it's pressing on a nerve, and that causes shooting pains in the body. And then I have another thing going on, and that's headache. So I've gotten decently good at expanding into, oh yes, and what else?
Right.
And that's good. But I'm trying to do what you're saying, and which is go into it and explore it.
Yeah.
And especially right at this moment, because it is doing a good job of shooting.
Yeah.
And
that's perfect. That's a perfect thing to examine.
And what I'm noticing is, see, part of me is doing what you're saying to get rid of the pain, and so I'm tightening around pain.
Right.
So now I'm.
That's a subtle problem.
So I'm not doing that. The more I relax into it, the more the different pains come up that I'm good at avoiding.
Right.
So that's interesting. I'm noticing the complexity of all these pains. I mean, the one shooting in my head is different than the one shooting, all this
Yeah.
stuff. And that's just the best I can do at the moment. I can't seem to relax more to the point of just being just totally in the depth of observation.
Right. You see, this is a challenge, and it's hard, particularly when it's something like pain, where you have a sort of an established relationship with it.
Right.
It's pain. You don't like it. You would love to fix it, and so there's this whole pre-established orientation,
Right.
which is sort of basically being set up in imagination, which is not to negate it,
Right.
but still in all, it's all of a sudden becomes a factor which complicates the investigation. And you're quite right. This kind of investigation is easiest and most effective when you can be with the patterning objectively. Like, remember what I said earlier, the first step in this kind of investigation is to separate out the interpretation of the pattern from the pattern itself, just as a sensory present.
Okay.
So even that it is pain is an interpretation. It's just a sensation.
And I've been doing this sensation. I did do get to that. I mean, I am in that, but at this moment, and I'm not interpreting. I am watching the sensation,
Mm-hmm.
and it's I've got to get back to that.
Well, you can like, what shape is it? Exactly where is it? And like, oh, it's here. But then you look more closely. Where exactly is it? Right there, or is it like a little bit there? Is it concentrated, or is it spread out? Can you tell? And the closer you look, you discover, well, it's a little vague. It's sort of, at first glance, it seems to be very localized, maybe. But then it's sort of, what does that mean? Is it, there's this fuzziness. Looking for that fuzziness. Not fuzziness in any kind of a good sense, just a fuzziness of I can't really pin down if it's here or there, if it's this or that. Is it sharp or is it burning? Is it bright or is it, I mean, and again, the point isn't to answer these questions. The point is to give you a point of ingress for it to expand into more detail. And the detail that you find will be more than you first noticed. And it's unpredictable exactly what that will be. And then whatever that expands into, go to that detail and let that expand into something else. And with something like pain, like I said, that's sort of almost a worst case. But even there, especially if you're stuck with it anyway, it's not impossible. And you may find yourself skimming off it, where you go into it and then you like back into like, oh, this sucks or whatever. And that's okay. Just like do that. Just let go. Don't try and fight that. Just do that. And then just when you, at a certain point, you'll notice this little bit of an opening and then you go back and just explore again. So it's not like you need to hold it or keep concentration or something.
Oh, okay. I was hoping something on because I kept.
No, there's no wrong.
I kept going into expansion. I mean, I would zip out and do expansion.
Yeah, no, expansion is good too, because that's there.
Right.
I mean, that's also there, and that's part of the infinity.
Yeah.
And no mode excludes the simultaneous presence of other modes. That's the very nature of unresolvable. It's here and it's not here. It's local and it's not local. It's concentrated and it expands. I mean, it's just, you just discover all of these paradoxes, and all of a sudden the experience is just unutterably weird. It actually is unutterably weird, and it's much weirder than if someone had dosed you with LSD or something. It's weirder than that. When you really see closely and precisely what's here, you'll be absolutely dumbfounded. There's a wonderful quote supposedly from Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas, which says something like, I'm not translating exactly, something like, seek until you find. When you find, you will be amazed, and when you find, you will be disturbed, and then you will be amazed, and then you will reign over everything. So this You know, at first you look at what's here and you go, no, it can't be that weird. And then it's like, whoa, it really is. And then at that point you reign over everything because you are literally the transcendental infinity.
A couple things as well, when you were first talking about patterns, I was thinking about the whole I'm having no head type of thing, where you see patterns, there's color and shape, but then when you turn it this way, there's no color and shape. So there's a very little pattern there. It's showing up as a capacity. Capacity doesn't have a color, it doesn't have a form. But I notice a tendency in me to want, when I want to look closer, is that I'll hang on to it being a certain way so that I can look at it closer. You know what I mean? And it's,
Yeah, but
yeah, it lets go when I.
but see, the being a certain way right there is an interpretation. So that's that second layer, and that's always the issue. That's always the fly in the ointment. Is we're so used to having the interpretive layer, and we're not used to discriminating. We think of them as the same thing. You know, this is a glass, as opposed to there's this experiential pattern that's present in the field of vision, the field of touch, and whatever, blah, 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 as well as the concept of it being a glass and that being meaningful in terms of memory and all this very other stuff, which also exists, but it does not exist or impinge upon say the pattern of light in the visual field, which is entirely its own thing. And that absolutely nothing to do with being a glass or having history or any of that other fantasy stuff. So they coexist, but they don't have anything to do with each other. In ordinary mental modes, in delusion, as we might say technically, those two are smeared together into one, and there's no discrimination. So there's the sensory pattern, and there's the interpretation, and the thing is the interpretation. You are a person, you are a woman, you are a Californian. So instead of, there's the interpretation of those, and then there's the sensory impression. And those two exist in their own dimensions and do in no way impinge. But most people don't notice this. The normal human mode is to smear it all together, and this is what creates the spiritual problem. So the spiritual solution is to disentangle that and see what's actually there, see the way it's actually there, and you will discover this principles that I've been talking about this morning. Yeah.
You can help me understand. So it's this distinction you're making between actuality and interpretation. So you're using an example of the phone and glass here. So something the light, the sound, the textures, these qualities, experiential qualities are the actuality, but there's this overlay of putting those patterns together significantly forming the phone or the glass. And it seems like if I look in the way that you're describing this pre-knowing thing, that it's interpretation all the way down.
Well,
in other words, if you're making a distinction between certain things that are the overlay and certain things that aren't an overlay, but they're in actuality. But how? Like we're talking about sound, for example, right? But as you were speaking beautifully about that the patterns that we're perceiving as a kind of actuality are themselves unresolvable.
Right.
We never arrive at what it actually is.
Right.
That's what I mean by interpretation all the way down, in the sense that I never can seem to arrive at, well, this is the actuality.
Right.
Bottomless.
The actuality is that it's bottomless. Bottomlessness is the actuality.
Right. It's not like, oh, now I'm in that. Now this is the actuality. This is the rest is just bad interpretation.
No. It's important to understand, first of all, it's all actual.
Right.
Anything that is present experientially is actual. But the important thing is to see the way it's present and what is present, and not smear things together. So thought is actual thought. Vision is actual vision. There's no actual interpretation is actual thought. It's actual. It's not actual. But thought is thought, and thought's claim to have something to do with something that's showing up in another sense field is just its claim. It doesn't mean that it's true. A thought can claim to be about something, but that doesn't make it actually have any relationship to the thing it claims to be about. I mean, the very nature of conceptual thought is spin doctoring.
But is there any recognition of what we call sense perception? Without, maybe let's say before there's a heavy
Of course,
conceptual overlay,
of course,
the perception of sound or light,
of course.
somehow there's some rendering of that into something coherent that I'm now calling sound and light, right?
Well, it's coherent in its own field of vision without any rendering at all. As soon as you call it light, obviously that's an interpretation, but the actual naked presence of vision is not conceptual. Vision is not a concept.
All snow, right?
Right, it's patterned. That's the bizarre thing is
And
that
only occurs some low level of interpretation, even if it's like you say, it's the intelligence.
no,
of
it's
the matter.
it's actual structure. There is actual structure.
There is.
Sure.
Like you said, it wasn't. The
There
patterning was unpatterned, so that-
Well, there's actual structure, but the structure is infinite. But that doesn't mean it's not actual. Actual and infinite are one and the same. Actual and unresolvable are one and the same. When you look at actuality, what you find is actual unresolvability, which is just objectively the fact. That doesn't negate the actuality at all. The field of vision is actual, even if all the patterns that appear are actually unpatterned. But they are actually that. They are actually unpatterned patterning, or apparently patterned unpatterned.
Right.
So the point I'm getting is to see what it actually is and the way that it actually is that, which doesn't exclude anything. Anything that is present has to be included, but it has to be included as it actually is, not confusing it with something else. And we're notorious for confusing our interpretations, our mental events with sensory events, when in actuality they're discrete.
It appears from my experience.
Oh yeah, everything appears.
And it appears that there's patterning and structure.
Oh, absolutely.
But as
There
you
is.
say, when that's investigated,
Right.
the structure, it isn't what, it's much more than.
Yes, it's
than
not.
it appears.
It's not negated. It's not canceled out. It's just not what it seems to be at first.
At first glance.
Yes, and so this is exactly the point. Is that we typically the spiritual problem comes from not having looked closely enough, from having been too credulous with our education, where we were fed a bill of goods about what's going on here and what things are, and we sort of settled with that without examining further. So we settled with that in the layer of our interpretation, all of our language and our names and our concepts of science and physics and sociology and whatever that we internalized and hold in our mind, and we use that as a conceptual overlay over our experience, right? But it's too simple. The interpretation doesn't go the distance. It doesn't actually comprehensively include every aspect of the actual phenomena. And so this is like a reality check. This is like doing the math yourself, like getting scientific. Okay, I've been educated that XYZ is what's going on here, right? Let me prove it for myself on the basis of actuality, which as far as I can find is my experience, because I can't find anything else actual. And that's the only basis that anyone has ever erected any theory of actuality on anyway. And so you're redoing the math, and what I'm pointing out is if you do it assiduously, if you prove it for yourself assiduously, you will probably end up with very different results than you were educated on, than the consensus reality, simplistic worldview of what's going on and what this consists of. Rather, and in point of fact, very fortunately, the result you'll end up with has a lot of very nice, delightful perks by comparison to the consensus reality version.
Well, when you like as you're saying, we apply it to ourselves.
Yeah,
our relationships
Yeah.
and how unfathomably multidimensional what we think is so far beyond our concepts and like say
Yeah. Absolutely.
what we are, what the world is, what people are, who they are, how they are. I mean, it's
absolutely
staggering.
it's absolutely staggering, and it's across the board. You know, into yourself, individuality, interrelationships, physical actuality, the nature of objects, the nature of cause and effect. I mean, all of this stuff turns out to have hidden depths that are just astounding and remarkable and totally unsuspected, basically, by consensus reality worldview, and yet not actually concealed or hidden, really easily discoverable with a little bit of sincere and intelligent investigation. You know, and that's all I'm trying to point out, is that if you're interested in exploring this, it's there to be explored, and you might find it rewarding to do so. And if you don't, that's absolutely cool, because you won't have lost anything from wherever you thought you were to begin with. You're still there as much as you ever were. So it's all good.
Continuing to go down the rabbit hole or into the fractal, it would seem that if everything is, radiance arising to be patterned, if you will, that you can't even say that there's an independently existing physical matter.
Right, of course.
That there's actually nothing, there is no physical matter, and there's no space within which the physical matter can appear.
Nothing can be found.
It's all nothing can be found.
Nothing.
So it's like there's everything which is nothing.
Right. Yes.
So
exactly. Everything there's nothing, but that doesn't negate everything.
Yeah.
It's very bizarre.
And this, you were talking about how we pattern. I had surgery several months ago, and in thinking back to it, when I woke up, and this all happened within a matter of just a few seconds.
Yeah.
There was this initial of just lights and sounds and feelings.
Yeah.
And then there was like a momentary burst of confusion, and then everything pulled together. It's like,
That was that was re-erect. That was the actual process of re-erecting that imaginary interpretive framework in your imagination, which then has the effect of parsing all of this stuff. Oh, that's right. This is an environment. I'm in a hospital. These are other people. This was a nurse. I'm me, and I'm in a bed, and all of that. Bang! Like just a holistic.
The other interesting thing that happened a few times, I guess, is all this stuff was washing out from the system. They call it kind of positive delirium.
Oh yeah.
I was in like conversation with a nurse, and all of a sudden it was just this sense. And I opened my eyes, and there was no one there. I mean, it was like I was in one reality and then another.
Sure.
And so then the implication, we do that with this.
Yeah, of course.
We're just as much trapped
Yeah.
here as we are in the delirious state.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point. We qualify these various states. Oh, that was a dream, or that was a delirium, but this is a waking state, and this is objectively true. But all of those qualifications are unverifiable. They just exist in the imagination, and typically we're not aware that they exist in the imagination. So there's a felt sense that they're objectively true. It's like a very deep hypnosis. We haven't talked much about hypnosis yet, but I want to talk about that next, which is a very important aspect of all this. Why don't we take a break? We've been hammering away at this for a little while. Don't want to get too dizzy yet. We got a long day here.
That's right.
I know you have a blender. This has to be blended. That was steam.
I love it, I love
Yeah.
We have a bull's eye.
Somehow everything is evolving into that thing. It reminds me of that Ambrose Bierce's definition of an expert. It's a person who learns more and more about less and less until they know absolutely everything about nothing.
Yeah. Strangely cognate.
It's just, you know, it just looks so deep because the light, you know, the way with light is just,
Yeah.
you can't see it anymore. So then they take their mathematical formula, which is their structural reason. They start extrapolating. It's all totally correct at that point. There's no way to verify it. It's shining light. You can do other kinds of things and then extrapolate. They think like it.
Reminds me I used to have, I saw before I freeze things while to work on them. And it's just, and it's funny because it's like in a program of options. And then, but
Yeah.
to fantasy. Which of course refutes our work. I mean, it's just not important. Technical as opposed to seeing its actuality. It's just,
Yeah, exactly. But even when you're doing that, the actuality is what's present. So it's always available, the possibility of disproving it. You know, even when you're holding something to be static, it's shifting out from under you in real time. And really pretty obvious, you sort of let yourself look.
it's almost like the hanging on. The hanging on, it's almost like hanging on to it.
Always think about something when you say that something's really. I'm actually thinking about that.
Yeah.
Really, it's either different than what you're saying.
Yeah.
More like that.
Because you can't even verify that it's different because you can't tell what it is in the first place, and you can't tell what it is in the second place, so you can't even tell that they're different.
Slippery thing like that. It's like you take that real slice of time and you keep going down like this to the point where you go down to a minus whatever. You just keep going and going and going and going. So, to the point where it's like disappear.
Yeah, all investigated parameters themselves disappear in the face of the data. So you try to investigate similarity, and similarity itself, even as a possibility, disappears. So, and you're definitely not even any parameters to investigate.
But you know, I'm having problem to catch the tension. When I look at things, you know, I look at my screen sometimes it's having weird breathing, but then I'm starting holding up and I'm really tired. So I have to let it go. So does everything else. I look at it starting vibrating, shivering or whatever, and then my eyes starting to like working hard, and then I have to let it go because it's tiresome.
It's okay to let that.
Okay, let's go. It's just my eyes. I don't know why. I just always feel that tension. But if I close my eyes, I can see this.
Well, you do it with your eyes closed. That's fine.
Yeah.
What you see with your eyes closed is the same.
Well, it is really fun though. Everything shows up and weird. You cannot explain anything. So I'm just giving up on the concept. But
You don't have to. It's not like you need to have it be that way and stay that way. You just need to see that it is that way, and then you know it. You don't need to keep proving it. Once you know it, you don't need to prove it.
but I just don't feel like that I had enough. I investigated enough.
Well, you can do it more, and that's okay. So the little bits is okay. You don't have little bits. It's okay just for a few seconds. It's fine.
I'm too practice oriented.
You're too dutiful.
That's my problem.
But just playing being with it lightly is just as effective as being with it seriously.
I have to relax.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I mean. Just relax and just do it like a game. And then when you get tired or bored, you just let it go. So it's just a game. Who cares? But even that is effective.
I think you should shoot for 24/7. I haven't applied that. So that's a good example. If you look at one little spot, everything else is fuzzy. Even that one little spot is fuzzy. Make everything clear. It's all fuzzy. And then apply that to activity as well. It's really fuzzy.
Anything whatsoever you look for, you never find anything precise. Nothing. And you look at the imprecision, it itself is imprecise. And I mean, it's just, you know.
The fuzzy is, you equate fuzziness with a set of feeling freedom.
Well, because only things that are a particular way can be a problem. If things aren't a particular way, how can they be a problem?
Yeah. You're gonna hear that deep conscious retreats. Oh man, this is great. I feel like really fuzzy. Oh, I gotta get clear.
You know, I have retired, but I've worked with hearing impaired people for many years, and before they had sign language, families made up their own sign language. And I had this one guy, probably in the 80s, and he was in his 50s. I worked at a community college. And he said that before he had language, he was like 5 years old, and he put his hand on the stove and he burned his hand. And so all he knows is there's this awful thing that's happening, and his mom's going, his dad's going, and nobody can tell him this is temporary. You burned yourself. That's fire. Don't put your hand in, and so I think of that, all those patterning, or if I was raised with, what are those, what do they call people that study bird sounds? Okay, so you and I could be standing here talking, and I could be hearing, oh, that's an oriole, or that's, and then I have these different patterns of understanding, whereas to me now, it's just, no, it was a nice sound, and it all goes through here, and
like if you're in a foreign country but they're speaking a language you don't understand, you hear it, but it's just right.
And you don't even pay attention to it. Or maybe you pay attention to the body language more and the facial expressions to kind of figure out.
Because that's a language you do speak.
Right. That's a universal language. Yesterday, I was feeling like, oh, I really got a lot from this. And maybe I have enough. And now I'm so glad I came again, because it's such a deeper, yesterday when I left after the experiential part, I felt like, oh, I have some tools now. But now it's this level, it's even deeper of how to escape this karma. Right. So.
There's nothing vague about this. It's actually very specific. And coming to be with these specifics more precisely is really useful.
Well, see, because I knew that it was consensus reality that made this up, and I didn't know that I had the choice of not being part of it. I thought, damn it, they made this lamp there when it was just all these particles and waves of, and damn, it's too late now. And I'm stuck because there's more of them than there is me. Didn't realize how I can go in and escape.
That's the great opportunity in this that makes this yoga possible. Just because you're in delusion doesn't mean you're not also in reality. You're always in reality. You can't not be in reality. So no matter how deluded you are, reality is always available because you're actually there too.
Yeah.
And which is very powerful.
understand what you're saying because I had the same
So
problem.
it's not like you need to
Yeah,
get
so I
from
said no.
delusion to reality.
It's not-
You just
it's
need to
not
notice
easy
that
anymore.
you're in delusion, but you're also in reality. So pay a little more attention to reality.
Right.
You give the shit about delusion. You don't even give it any attention.
Right. I have no problem.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, no, there's one way. I can go around.
But this line is actually blocking out.
Maybe not.
What are you
Yeah,
doing?
I think we're not doing that.
Maybe not.
So we just let it not easy. Laura, Laura, I can sit there and see.
Chris, do me a favor, just for a second, a little to that side. Yeah.
She wants to see if she got too much of the way.
No, more better.
That's better.
Here.
My eyes are really freezing.
Did I stand here the whole time?
Like, go sit in the back.
But I like sitting in the front.
You were so desperate for fans.
No, I'm trying to get rid of them. That's good.
Woke up. No, I'm happy. In the snow. In the shorts. Good car temperature. I don't know how I like that. For 40 years. Yeah. I mean, he's comfortable that way. He's being comfortable wearing a lot of clothes. But I'm saying, yeah, I got that. Yeah, the ones where they survive, those are really cool. She had her child, she's underneath the tree with an infant. She's holding it, and suddenly she heard like a swarm of bees. Instinctually, she didn't know why, but she tossed her baby into a pile of things. And she got hit like that. Survived it. Really? I like looking at that.
Yeah. Where I grew up, it was happening every spring.
Oh, yeah.
I love that one. That's how you think of all the light beauty and summer clouds.
Would you be without?
Even though it's like, but all of a sudden it's like, you just follow through with it right now.
Exactly.
So, you know, I'm looking at this, but I still like, maybe there's a subtle expectation or something. I don't know. But I'm like, okay.
So why is there this affinity?
Yeah, what is
No one else says this. Nobody understands?
No other teacher talks about looking at
You're asking the wrong guy.
But that's the important lab. It's so that's constantly reinforcing this area. Just do a little bit more of this. Exploring that. Yeah. Amazing how it's a lot of information leads itself.
That's kind of the point. Self-correcting system.
She asserted herself saying that this is what you guys really want to do. But I understand. Change the population.
Nice job.
It's a Dharma chai bell.
It's a water glass, Stan. It's a water glass.
It's a water bill.
You can't label anything.
You can, but you'll always be wrong.
Okay. There's one more topic, major topic, which I'd like to bring up this morning, and then we'll spend the rest of the day just exploring all the different aspects and ramifications of this stuff. This last topic I want to bring up is hypnosis. Now, hypnosis is very important to understand. Hypnosis is the mechanism by which an idea, which is very abstract, acquires a felt sense of actuality. So, we all know about the hypnosis, where stage magician gets someone on stage and says, you're a chicken, you're a chicken, you're a chicken, all of a sudden someone goes, wah, wah, or whatever. I mean, just all that sort of stuff. And that is hypnosis. But hypnosis is more ubiquitous than that. Hypnosis is always happening anytime there's human presence and especially human interaction. The very nature of the way consciousness deals with symbols is consciousness tries to actualize the ideas that it hears or that it conceives of to one degree or another. In other words, it tries to simulate the notion. And so this is essentially hypnosis. Now, all communication has a hypnotic component. As soon as someone says something to you, even if you vehemently disagree, your mind will, to a certain extent, try to simulate that as an actuality for you experientially. And any notion that is asserted as a positive statement, the mind will immediately spontaneously play with that and try to feel that as an actuality. And there's no limit to how successfully it can do that. Basically anything that you feel about you, about your life, about your world, about your situation is a hypnotic belief that you have essentially your mind has conditioned you into feeling as if it was an actuality. You know, this applies across the board, and it's always in operation anytime there are symbols being used, anytime there's thought, anytime there's words, or certainly anytime there's communication. So language is suggestion. You know, when the mind hears a concept, it will try to simulate that to one degree or another. It will try and simulate that as an actuality, and that simulation, that sort of virtual enactment, it's almost like a portion of you that's dreaming will dream as if that was true, and this dreaming can come up against other things that same portion of you is dreaming are true, and if it's dreaming those more strongly, there can be conflict. So if someone, you know, say you're of a particular political persuasion and someone of a very different political persuasion starts giving you their propaganda, a portion of your mind will imagine what it would be like to hold that, but then that portion of your mind will come against a portion of your mind that it is holding another hypnotic virtual actualization, and there will be conflict or striking. But the other one isn't any more true. It's simply, you know, anything you hold, you feel to be true, especially if it feels obviously true and like an objective certainty. That's a sure sign that is a hypnotic belief. So this is very interesting, and there's no problem with this. It's not like it's bad or you have to do something about it, but it's important to be aware of this mechanism and notice it. That way, you can see what it is, see it for what it is, and you can also use it to your advantage. So a lot of this kind of investigation that I'm talking about can be facilitated by using hypnosis deliberately. In other words, you sort of prime the pump of investigation. You say, you know, when I'm seeing, you know, I'm looking at a shape, you know, right away, as soon as you say I'm looking at a shape, all of a sudden, your mind tries to turn it into a shape. Okay, it's not a person, it's a shape. You know, you may have the strong felt, no, I'm looking at a person, you know, because that's the dominant hypnotic pattern. But as soon as you tell yourself, okay, I'm looking at a shape in my visual field, the mind tries to create that as a virtual reality. It's like a kind of a virtual enactment of simulating that. And so that kind of primes the pump of setting it up. Now, and this can be useful as a way to kind of again priming the pump or sort of grease the skids in terms of getting things started in this kind of investigation. The danger in it, it's not like it's a danger, it's not dangerous, but the potential snag in that, the potential fly in the ointment, is hypnosis is always fantasy. So when you're using hypnosis, you're liable to spin off into fantasy, and if you don't notice it, you'll just be off and running, and which is fine because that's our normal condition anyway. So it's no harm, no foul. But in terms of this kind of a investigation of actuality, it can be a sort of a distraction. Let's see, what else can we talk about? So, for example, everything I am doing with you all is essentially hypnotic. Like all this stuff, I've been sitting here talking and saying all these words, saying all these ideas, and your mind hears these notions and it tries to simulate them. Whether or not you know what it is I'm talking about specifically or precisely or not, or even not at all, still in all, your mind tries to turn it into something for yourself. And so it's inevitable in any human community. Anytime anyone says something to you, there's a hypnotic component to the communication. To a certain extent, your mind tries to simulate that. It tries to turn that into something that is actually true, rather than just an implication that it's completely arbitrary and abstract.
What is that? Simulate.
What do you mean?
Imagine? What is simulate?
It can't be said what it is. It's essentially fantasy, but it's felt.
Created.
Yeah, for example, almost all human emotions that people identify as a result of hypnosis. When someone is really depressed, that's a result of hypnosis. When someone is really sad, that's a result of hypnosis, because they're reacting to a story. Oh God, I'm really sad because my wife, thinks this and that and blah 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 blah.
So behaving as it.
Yeah, behaving as if. That's what I mean by simulate. And it's not just behaving. It's because it's unconsciously behaving as if. So it actually feels like it's real. It feels like that's what it is. And you aren't aware that it's actually a created state. It's a mental concept that is being actualized as if it was real. Okay, you go to a movie. You go to a movie that's a tearjerker, and you get a little repeat. What's up with that? It's fucking rich Hollywood actors, being paid millions of dollars to parade around on a screen bullshitting. What are you crying about? Because they're portraying a hypnotic suggestion of something that if you imagine yourself in that situation, it would provoke an emotional response. And of course, we feel that. That's why we go to movies, basically to be jerked around. We go to movies to be hypnotized. Okay, and any reaction to a movie is essentially hypnotic. You laugh at comedy. It's the same thing. There's nothing happening. There's a couple of people bullshitting. And you, oh, that was really fun. That was great. That was funny. How did that happen? I mean, the whole thing is you basically let yourself simulate in your imagination believing what they're saying as if it was the case. So two guys walk into a bar, and right away you're picturing two guys walking into a bar. Even if you don't want to, the mind just goes there. The mind is saying, "Yeah, feed me. I want more." The mind is like a sugar junkie standing in front of a candy store. Information concepts, great, man. Give me more. I want a story. I'm off and running. I want some entertainment here. And so this, and again, this is not an issue or a problem, but it's a factor, and it's very useful to be aware of this factor, so you can see it in yourself, you can see it in operation, and you won't be just a gullible dupe of it, of assuming things are a certain way just because they feel like they're a certain way. All that means is you're under a hypnotic actualization of holding it to be that way. And you don't even need to not be. That's all cool, but just know it. Well, okay. Yes.
Non-meditation, meditation guidance.
The complete hypnosis. Yeah, but that doesn't negate it. That just indicates the medium. It's like inviting you to create a movie that you wouldn't have created if I wasn't feeding you the plot of the movie. So I'm feeding you the plot of the movie, and then your mind creates that movie for yourself to some extent.
So, and I was wondering if you can do that before you leave together.
Well, I did it yesterday. I don't know if you weren't here, but we can do that again today.
I was just curious if you were still doing that.
But here's the interesting thing about hypnosis. Hypnosis, even though the mind stimulates notions, this is not necessarily a problem or a delusion. It can actually lead you closer to actuality if the information that it's trying to simulate happens to be relatively accurate. No information is actually accurate, because the actuality cannot be symbolized. It cannot be conceptualized accurately. But there can be approximations that are closer than others. And so for example, all of my teaching is essentially uses a hypnotic mechanism. All spiritual teachers use a hypnotic mechanism. Some people are aware of it and some people aren't, in terms of teachers. And some people use it what I consider cynically, to manipulate people, and to create like the bliss doctors who give you bliss and everything, or you go to a kirtan and everyone's all teary and, this is so wonderful. God, there's so much love here. My heart's opening, It's, yeah, cool, but it's all hypnosis. It doesn't make it not real, but you're being led on a ride. You're being fed a story, and you're reacting to the story as if it's true. And that's absolutely cool. We do this all the time, and if that's what you want to do, there's no problem. But for the purposes of yoga, for the purposes of really investigating reality, you want to be aware of this mechanism so that you aren't under its sway, so that you can, you need to not be in hypnotic states, because you're always in hypnotic states. It doesn't matter. But when you're aware of it, you're not taking it for something it's not. You're not taking it for objective reality. And so essentially all of my presentations is hypnotic, but all of any presentation is essentially hypnotic. You can watch a TED Talk on TV and it's all hypnotic. The guy's talking about this, and look, the situation's like this. We have this global blah, blah. It's like, yeah, it's all like, you may as well be going like this, But I try to present information concepts that as your mind tries to actualize those, it's actually actualizing something that will probably tend to be very close to or very much in the direction of the way things actually are, as opposed to something that's much more wildly divergent from the way things actually are, which most consensus reality hypnotic modes consist of. So it's you're replacing a really crazy hypnotic image with a less erroneous hypnotic image. So the point is not that means anything. That's just all communication is that. The point is when you're aware of that and you notice it, you can see it happening, and you aren't just a passive patsy to it. You can see it happening and see that it's going on, and you can substitute your own counter hypnosis. Someone's talking to you and they're basically stringing you along, trying to take you somewhere, and you can be saying to yourself, you can be providing your own internal counter suggestion of, "Boy, this person's nuts. This person's nuts." And then, of course, your mind, hearing those words, will try to actualize that and hold that. Okay, I'm holding this person's crazy, and then you're in a position where you're imagining the person talking to you is crazy, whether or not they are. You're creating a virtual condition where that's so, which tends to invalidate what they're saying. For example, this is an arbitrary example.
Well, I just was going to say, when I was telling you about the pain, in the process of telling you, I started to feel like I was going to cry because of the words I was using. The minute you said, "Oh, well, you can go back and forth and in and out and all of that," whammo.
See?
Gone.
See? This is the power of hypnosis.
Exactly.
Hypnosis is a very, very powerful tool for navigating your experience, and you can use it. You can use it. It's like all of a sudden you have a rudder. You have you have your own little warp engine that can shoot you into different modes of experience just by telling yourself it's so. And the mind will try to make it so. But Star Trek, make it so #1. That's what the mind spontaneously tries to do. The mind wants to generate these fantasies and wants to make them as real as possible, and all it needs is a seed. Just like, "Oh, give me a seed, please give me a seed, entertain me, feed me." That's what the mind is doing. And so you this one notion in the mind is off and running. It's like, okay, you are infinite openness and you feel no pain. Right away, the mind is like, "Oh, I'm infinite openness and I feel no pain. Cool." Right?
Yes.
And you can do it yourself too.
Well, yeah, that's why I asked for your help, because I had a feeling I was missing a piece of it.
Yeah, but you play with it, and it's subtle because there's hypnosis and counter hypnosis, and especially when you're doing things like dealing with pain, because a part of you is doing an ongoing hypnosis. Boy, I'm in pain. It's really hurts. Boy, I'm in pain. It's really hurts. Boy, it sucks. Boy, I'm really up to creep. Boy, I'm fucked. So part of you is just doing this whole mantra unconsciously, that's reifying all this stuff. And so you come in with another part of you, and it's going to come up against that, which you may or may not be aware is there. So you have to kind of slip it under the radar sometimes and trick it. So sometimes if you try to use a hypnotic suggestion to counter something else, you're actually reifying to something else you're trying to counter, because you're actually telling yourself that it's important enough to do something about, which is a way of telling yourself that it's really real and severe.
And I did watch that before I asked you the question, because I was aware of the motivation or what was going on behind. It was a way of resisting, and so I was creating what I was, resisting and all of that.
Yeah, resisting is actually defending. When you're resisting something, you're actually defending the thing that you're.
Yeah. So, but you snuck it in. Of course, you did.
I'm a magician.
You want to come over?
I get that invitation from girls all the time.
So you have to use the word belief. Is that reification? Is believing, imagining this real?
Belief is just a result of hypnosis.
Yeah.
So it's not a separate. It's not actually a separate condition. You're always in various. There's always arbitrary modes of clouds of belief floating around that you tend to gravitate towards, that are your sort of normal hypnotic modes, and you tend to sort of float in various of those will become dominant.
Yes, but what I'm saying is, what is believing?
Believing is just hypnosis. It's not actually a separate thing. It's not like there's hypnosis and then there's believing.
So is all reactive emotion hypnosis?
Yes. All.
What would you ask?
She's asked, is all reactive emotion hypnosis? And my answer was an unequivocal and very pointed yes.
So glad.
The true emotion, if you can become very, it's very cool that that's the case. If you can become very sensitive to reality, a corollary of the tuning into the patterns is the whole hypnotic thing recedes in relevance, because you know that no condition that could be used as a hypnotic suggestion could have any validity from the get-go. A priori, it can't be that way, because for it to be that way, it would have to be resolvable that it is that way, and actually nothing is resolvable. So the more you discover that the conditions are actually unresolvable, the more immune you become internally, spontaneously, to hypnosis. And one of the side effects of this, one of the delightful side effects, is your emotional landscape changes, it develops. The natural emotional state free of hypnosis is a rich lusciousness with very minor, slow sort of tidal currents and stuff. So that it's not actually static or fixed, because nothing is static and fixed. But it's basically sort of a rich, full juiciness that is not dependent upon circumstances, not dependent upon particular conditions, and it's just always there. It's like a nice undercurrent of lusciousness to experience in life force. And this is the condition that one comes to when one begins to more and more explicitly inhabit what this actually is. When you begin to free yourself from misinterpretations of patternless patterns as being actual patterns, which means they're actual things, which means they're actual conditions, which means they matter, which means what happens really matters, which means I'm screwed. And all of a sudden you're off and running, and you're just lost in various hypnotic conditions because, oh God, woe is me, I'm just stuck because this is happening and so is happening and so doesn't love me and this, that, and the other, and then and I'm getting old and life sucks and then I'm gonna die, and like, oh, really? And so there's no, you're drowned out by this by by reacting to this soap opera that your mind is projecting and hypnotically reifying, your actual emotional condition, is drowned out by this soap opera, and you're just, oh my God, no, I feel so bad, I'm just so depressed. But when all of that dies down, it's just this wonderful richness.
So Ananda applies to that.
I'm sorry?
The word Ananda or Ananda applies
Yeah.
to that.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's controversy about translating that.
Sure.
But that seems like what you're talking about.
Absolutely. It's the intrinsic richness, lusciousness, deliciousness. I mean, there's lots of words you can throw at it of reality itself. Reality is intrinsically that. And of course, when it's seen as it is, it's felt to be that. It's not, reality is not just a neutral, mechanical, well, here it is, like a block of stone sitting there and like, so what? It's actually a vibrant, luscious fullness of profundity and juiciness and as it's, the more clearly it's seen as it is, the more this is felt to be obviously the case and participated in and enjoyed. I mean, it said, for example, in the Vedas, it said that the nature of reality is Satchidananda, being, which is usually translated being, consciousness, bliss. You've heard me use this phrase, radiant presence. Sat, being, is presence. Chit, consciousness, is radiance, the presence of all this patterning, apparent patterning, which isn't really patterning. And Ananda is just the juicy, luscious vitality of it all. And that's really what it is. And when you see what it actually is and are living in what it actually is, that's what it is for you. It's not any more or less than that. Not as like something to aspire to or something to assert. It just happens to be the case that that's what it is. That's what you're left with. That's what you got. How do you hand that?
Yeah. Well, when you were talking about hypnosis, it reminded me of a couple things. Back in high school, I tried affirmations for a short while, and initially they were kind of cool, and then after a while they actually made the thing that I was trying to get away from more strong.
See, affirmations are slippery because an affirmation always has a context, which is the counter affirmation. Right. If you're affirming, I am happy today, there's a counter unconscious affirmation of, boy, I'm really not very happy, and I wish I was happy.
And I better make this affirmation.
Right. So you're actually, there's actually a person which is making the counter affirmation, and the fact that we talked about that in addressing pain. It can be very slippery.
Right.
When you try to correct something, you're actually throwing gasoline on the thing you're trying to correct. You're saying, this is real, it's really real, it really matters so much that I better try and correct it and do something about it. So even though it looks on the surface like you're affirming its opposite, what you're actually doing is strengthening the real condition. So it's slippery, it's very slippery.
Good. There's another, and then deeper than affirmations, at least for me, but still not what you're at, was when I started doing Byron Katie's stuff, because it wasn't like an affirmation, it was actually discovering a total different way of, an opposite way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And that hadn't occurred to me before. Oh, that's just as real. And then the thing would kind of let go.
Yeah, Byron Katie stuff is great.
Yeah.
The trick is you have to take it all the way. With the trick with Byron Katie stuff is you have to get that the answer to the first question is always no.
Yeah.
And the answer to the second question is always no. And once you get that, you don't need to keep asking the question. You don't need to do it over and over. You don't need to become a serial worker where, okay, no, I know it does not. Let me work on this. It's like, before you even start, the answer is no. Is this true? No. Is it like this? No. Can I know if it's like this? No. So right away, the work is done. It's done a priori without needing to do it. Because patterns don't resolve. So no condition is a particular condition, because that it is that way cannot be verified. Because when you look into the actual experiential presence of what any condition is, it turns out to be vastly more subtle and weird and beyond and nonlinear than you're holding it to be. So the initial problems canceled out just by what it's made of.
So when I feel better, there is a reaction that stays like automatically, it's like a bell. I'm believing something, it's hypnosis,
Uh-huh.
right? And that's it. So there's nothing like affirmations don't really work. Opposites, this, that, blah, blah, just things. So it's just a matter of like noticing, okay, something is racing, there's a reaction, ding, 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 belief, hypnosis, no point of even investigating. Like just see it's a bell that there is a belief, hypnosis, right?
And then when you see that, then that's there, but that's not the only thing there. You see? And because that's not the only thing there, what else is there is different than that and other than that. And so even if that's there, you're not stuck in it because there's something else there too, and something else in that, and something else in that, and something else in that. So you're never actually trapped in anything. You're never actually in anything because you're also in something else, and something else in that, and so on. So
Yeah, you don't have to stay there.
yeah. You know, when you don't see that it's a belief, you may kind of keep circling back and jumping into it and reaffirming it, re-hypnotizing yourself with it. It becomes kind of like an addiction or I don't know what. But as soon as you, I mean, simply exploring and investigating the hypnotic mechanism and discovering how ubiquitous it is, how it's constantly in operation. Anytime there's conceptualization, anytime there's symbols or words being used, there's hypnosis. There's a degree of hypnosis. Because that's the way the mind works. The mind wants to simulate ideas. And just seeing that happens will give you a lot of insight into the dynamism of your psychology and just the way your energy runs from day to day in different circumstances.
What I find is that the reactions have diminished significantly.
Yeah.
But they don't ever really go away. They're kind of like
They don't need to.
subtly, they're always there.
Yeah, it doesn't matter because it's the nature of the mind to keep trying to simulate things and run things. And so the mind, even when you see that you're not who you've been thinking you were all your life, your mind will still be trying to simulate that because it's so used to doing that. And so that'll always be kind of running in the background just as a thing. But it just becomes a ghostly thing that's there and doesn't really matter because it's not particularly dominant. So what? You know, like I know conclusively for a fact, objectively, profoundly, across the board that I am not Peter Brown. But Peter Brown isn't erased. The Peter Brown file is still in the system, and every now and then the computer keeps running it, you know. But it doesn't matter because I'm not that, so it's irrelevant. It's like when it happens to be a rainy day or a sunny day, or a red car happens to drive by. Sometimes red cars drive by. Sometimes they're not red. Sometimes Peter Brown's reactions show up. Sometimes they don't. But it has nothing to do with anything because you're not stuck in it. It's not me. It's just an energy pattern wafting through. And energy patterns waft through because that's what they do. That's what we have is energy patterns wafting through. Non-stop.
I recently got a ticket, parking citation for parking on the trail. There's no trail there either, so I decided no, I didn't do this. So I kept saying, kept going through that with the total drive, go over there and look and see, measured it. I'm so fixated on this whole running on something, fighting and thinking it over and over again. Just amazing to watch. And then kept on going. First I thought, I'm not going in there.
There was no trail.
I said, no, I didn't do it. There's no trail. Show me the trail. And I said, well, since it's never happened before, $7 so I go next. That's amazing. I kept going. I guess that's just the farming patterns.
You can
spin. I spin.
If you're a really good spinner, you can next time you're parked at a fire hydrant or something, get a ticket for that. You can explain to the policeman how there's not really a fire hydrant there.
Yeah, there you
You
go.
can't find a fire hydrant. Is it really a fire hydrant? How do you
I'm
know?
trying to tell you, it's unresolved.
Yeah, I'd rather just say, "Get rid of the ticket." That was such a big deal, so that nothing else is good. That was a big thing, and I said, you know, I don't have enough to do, let's not do that.
Well, the mind likes to keep itself off the streets, so to speak. Likes to keep itself busy, and so you'll find yourself doing all sorts of crazy bullshit.
Yeah.
But hey, it's good to have a hobby.
Yeah.
That'll do something to pass the time. Sitting in a room, not moving but breathing. You go to the bathroom every once in a while. It's kind of old after a little while. If you're into it, that's fine. But most people want to do a little more than that. I have a lot of hobbies, so I can relate. So again, which kind of gets back to the fact that there's all these hypnotic mechanisms, the fact that one has one's personality mechanisms, all that is not an issue or problem. It's not a matter of changing anything, it's a matter of seeing what it is. When you see what it is, you're free of it. You don't need to negate it, you don't need to stop it, you just need to see it. And when you see it, you're free of it. So you see what your personality is and you're free of it, but that doesn't cancel it out or negate it, but it doesn't need to be negated or canceled out, so who cares? Your personality can stick around as much as it ever was because it's not anything.
To me, it's like fascinated by seeing the story in my mind running, and seemingly so important, so relevant. But then quickly, I see, oh, it's just a thought. It doesn't have any. It's just a weird energy, and they're passing by it very quickly. It disappears so quickly. So that's kind of educational. Even though the things may come back, but it's like fun to watch.
Yeah.
Go away. You went away quickly.
Yeah.
It's always like that.
Yeah.
So it's,
And that illustrates the same point. It's if anything, it's important to see what this stuff is. It's not important to stop it. You don't need to be sane. You just need to see that you're crazy. And then the fact that you're crazy is a non-issue. It's just a given. It's just so what? I'm stone bonkers. I'm a neurotic jerk. And it's okay. Now what? I don't know. What's for lunch? It's when you don't see it that you're trapped in it. When you see it, you're free of it, but you don't need to negate it or change it necessarily. You're free to try to negate it and change it all you want. You're free to indulge in all sorts of self-improvement and psychotherapy and all this stuff. And that it's all very well and good. Maybe you'll get some mileage out of it, who knows? But in actuality, it's not important that you do that. It's the seeing that's powerful. It's the seeing that's liberating, not that you need to change or establish some ideal condition.
Is that because you can just step away?
Well, because there's nothing to step. There's no you to step away from it. It's just a pattern that happens to be there. It's like that particular bush happens to be outside the window. It's just like, well, yeah, you could change it, but it would just be something else. So when the personality and the person and its flaws and its quirks is annoying when you think you are it, because then there's all this self-assessment and self-value and self-image issues come up. But when you see it's not you, when you see it's just energy patterns that have a tendency to recur arbitrarily, then it's a non-issue because it doesn't have anything to do with you. So whether it's there or not, it's like, it just doesn't matter. You're free from it being an issue.
Reflecting yesterday on just how hopelessly dualistic language is. And it said, the mind and language, and it says, it may say it's not dualistic, and they say we're talking about the outside, or there's something. And anytime language is in operation, the opposite of the word and the concept is being implied. I can see, that's for me to get that the Brahman, it transcends dual and non-dual.
Yeah.
It's because using those words, is not inhabiting the reality that there is. So being aware of that maybe will give me a leg up to not dupe myself or hypnotize myself into thinking that I'm talking about reality when I'm using words, when I'm talking about dualism, non-dualism, absolute, relative, blah blah blah.
The structure of language, the implication of the structure of language is entirely erroneous, entirely inaccurate. Not just a little bit, but drastically, radically wrong. For example, in language, you have nouns. Nouns are supposedly things, and you have different nouns. So this noun is this thing, and that noun is that thing. That thing is not this thing is not that thing. In actuality, there's no things, and there's no different things. So right off the bat, nouns have a completely erroneous implication. In language, you have verbs. Verbs supposedly represent action. In reality, there is no action. There are no actions. So there's no things and no actions. But just the use of language keeps reaffirming that there are things and there's actions. That bush is outside the window waving in the breeze. Even though there's no bush, no window, no breeze, and no waving. Those descriptions are entirely inaccurate in capturing the actuality of what's happening. And so noticing this, then you give up on language. You don't expect it. Language is total bullshit, so you don't expect it to be anything otherwise, and you're no longer under its sway. Anything that can be said is a total and utter lie with a total and utter erroneous implication. Period. God, thank goodness, I'm glad we got that established. Every single thing I've said in the last 2 days is not true. Is a misleading implication, is wrong, is inaccurate, is not like that. Because actuality cannot be said in words. Very, very simple. It just can't be done. And yet, it can be useful to use language, but its usefulness is not in its accuracy, because it has none. Its usefulness is in its hypnotic quality of seduction and simulation, of inviting people to investigate certain possibilities that might not otherwise be there if it hadn't been for them, if it hadn't been suggested.
When you hear haiku, maybe you go, the tree is green, the sky is blue, and it's like, so what? What are you talking about? But the person writing haiku may be having this experience that they're trying to put into words, but it just doesn't. It's really lost.
It's evocation.
Yeah.
And evocation transcends logic. Evocation is essentially a hypnotic mechanism, where you string words together not because the words mean something, but because the process of stringing them together hopefully evokes a certain degree of a mental condition that you're trying to evoke for whatever reason, artistically or, in this case, yogically, whatever.
And it seems that this bring, like physical yoga, hatha yoga, this brings other components into the process, whereas if it's just a head thing, just so more whatever, with heart, body, mind, when they can be brought into some kind of mutual action, then that's more likely to yield closer, perception of reality. And that can be the value of something like happiness or vipassana, as long as it's not precious ego-based witnessing.
One time, I remember you were saying that the action is to appear. It's just the action is appear.
Yes.
And
the only action.
Yeah, the only action is appear. So this kind of flashes, I saw these flashes. Oh, it's just appear. It's not doing or happening. It's just appear.
Right.
But this kind of only comes like flashes. It's not sustained.
Yeah.
Only not snapping out of this dream.
The only, what Helen's saying, the only true verb is appear. You know, every verb actually is saying appear. Because that's all the patterns do, is they appear. They appear as if they interact. They appear as if this causes that. They appear as if this moves into that. But all that it is a appearing. And the interrelationship of the patterns is all inference. It's all spin doctored. It's all imagined. It's like in a dream. You know, in a dream there may be a monster chasing you, and so you reach around and kick it. And because you kicked it, it sort of stumbles a bit, and then you outrun it, right? It didn't stumble because you kicked it. You didn't kick anything. It was a fucking dream. Nothing was there. There was no impact whatsoever. There was no interaction. It was just an appearance. So the monster appears. The kicking appears. The monster faltering appears. And the running away appears. And that's the only thing that's actually happening there. There's actually no interaction between the apparent sub-elements or sub-objects in a dream, because there are no objects, there are no elements. It's just an apparition. There's no interaction. And it's all experiences like that. All there is patterns appearing. The patterns appear to interact, right? But the operative word there is appear. Because it cannot be verified that they actually do.
So there's no cause and effect?
There's no cause and effect.
It's all made up.
It's all made up. And that's something. That's a trip.
I hope it sinks in more.
Well, look and see. Look and see. Look and see. Look and see.
It's funny because cause and effect is, conversations are cause and effect.
Well, they look as if they are. They appear to be. But again, because you can't tell what's actually happening, because the patterns that make up the event are unresolvable, it seems like that you're there, and it seems like I'm here, and it seems like we're talking. But if I go look at the pattern that I'm thinking of as you, and the pattern I'm thinking of as me, and the pattern I'm thinking of as talking, I can't tell what they actually are. I can't tell what they're actually doing. It doesn't resolve into being able to pin it down to actually be that. So even though superficially it looks like it is that, it doesn't. It's not. It can't be found. It cannot be found as that. And not in a conceptual way. It literally cannot be found.
You said before that there's only cause, so is appear the same as cause?
Yes. Yeah. There's only cause, which is synonymous with what you might call the will of God. And what the will of God does, the will of God's action is cause things to appear. Or you could say, God dreams reality. And you could say, God is the subject, and dreams is the verb, and reality is the object. Or you could say, I dream reality because I am God, and then you get the same equation. But it's a moot point whether you, what words you're using.
Well, the cause and effect keeps one defined in a small box.
Yeah.
And yet still provides, so that's, we'll say I live, and yet there's this other spot. But
Sure.
the cause and effect also provides functionality in life.
Well, it seems to, but that's an argument.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. It just seems to.
Yeah.
I tend to believe, too.
Yeah. Yeah. All the normal functionality and interaction and behavior and cause and effect all seems to be the case.
Yeah.
And you don't need to say it's not the case, but just because it seems to be the case doesn't mean that's what's actually happening. You know, if you and you see this when you look at why you do what you do. You know, because the simplistic thing is, oh, I decided to do this because of blank. So that was the cause of me doing it. But if you look more close, why did that happen? You know, how, and you go looking for these things, and right away you find mystery. Sooner or later you get to a point where, I don't know why. Why did I feel like that? Where did that come from? Why am I me? Why do I decide to do the things I do? You know, why did I get out of bed this morning instead of just saying, screw it, I'm going to sleep in? I can't answer those questions. I can pretend to. I can say, oh, because I'm, you know, this, that, and the other, but that's all spin doctrine. If I'm really honest and I say, and you look and see, well, where did this come from? It just appeared. There it is. And ultimately, everything is you get to that point where it just appeared that way. And even that it is that way, you can't know, but it appears as if it was that way. It's about the best you can ever get to.
So it felt completely weird to see there is just this appearing and there's no story whatsoever.
Yeah.
So it's just this happening and appearing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
And
that
yet,
cannot be, you know, if you say because of this, because that's the story you put in there.
Yeah.
What the appearing doesn't have any
right.
story.
Because the story depends upon the elements you're supposing to be present in the situation. The individuals, the people, the situation. And in actuality, all of those are much more subtle and complex than you're holding them to be. So your story is completely wrong anyway. And if you look even closer, even that they're there, that they are that, you can't verify. And so the whole thing just dissolves. You can't be found. And yet the mind continually just spins out these stories, spins out this analysis, because that's its mode. Remember yesterday I talked about how the mind is like a Pentagon threat department that just keeps spinning out hypothetical attack plans. It's not going to stop doing that. The mind is just busy churning away back here saying, gosh, maybe this is happening here, maybe that's happening here, maybe this is happening here. And whether you're actually consciously thinking that or not, your mind is doing that. And every now and then one of them rises to the surface.
But the human mode is so easily trapped into this beginning story.
Yeah. Because of the collective hypnosis of being immersed in the constant ongoing suggestion of the media, of other people's language, of other people's behavior. So consensus reality perpetuates itself and reinforces itself. It's like a big flywheel that weighs down. And trying to extricate yourself from that or trying to be with that in another mode can be very tricky because you keep having consensus reality thrown at you. You open the computer, you know, you read a sentence, you listen to two people chatting, or someone comes up to you and a friend and you're talking, oh, hi, how you doing? How you been? You know, what have you been up to? You know, yesterday I saw so-and-so, and blah, blah, you're off and running. And it's all like, really? Is that really what's happening here? You think so, eh? But you know, you don't do that because you'd be a real jerk. So most of the time you go, oh yeah, you know, yeah, how about that? So, but it's an issue. It's an issue because, you know, a yogi, you know, and historically, frequently yogis are advised to go off and find a cave in the mountains somewhere and get away from people, for this very reason, because people will tend to try and drag you down to the lowest common denominator of consensus reality. It's in the nature of human socialization. We do that. It's a tribalizing mechanism. Humans are programmed to try to be like the people around them and to try to make people around them be like them. It's like an inherent automatic tribalizing, homogenizing mode. And it happens unconsciously, and it happens very profoundly, very powerfully. You know, you live in a city, and without even trying to, within a few years, you start looking more or less like the other people that live in the city and behaving more or less like the other people that live in the city. It's fact. You know, it's not, you don't do it on purpose or try to do it. It happens. It's like, because of this inherent modes, genetic, whatever, in the patterning, in the behavioral, in the functional patterning of being a human being, there's this very dominant mode of tribalizing, of reaffirming the tribal connection by using the same words and using the same gestures. You hang out with people who do a certain gesture a lot, you'll find yourself doing the same gesture. Unconsciously, you will. You hang out with people who use certain turns of phrase a lot, you'll find yourself using the same turn of phrase. It's not evil, it's just human. This is a human mode. As humans, we're social creatures. We're tribal. Our basic mode is tribal. And what reinforces and enforces and enacts this whole tribal mode is this homogenizing urge that we have, inherently biologically, to be like the people around us and to urge them to be like us. And this is a real issue for the yogi, because as a yogi, you're trying to extricate yourself from that, not necessarily negate it or cancel it out, or it's evil and you want to eradicate it, but you're trying to go a little bit deeper. You're trying to do something else, and that is just a distraction. And so, it can be an issue of how to deal with that. One way to do it is just have a running mantra: people are crazy, people are crazy, people are crazy. And then when people come up and talk to you, you're already hypnotically programming yourself to think they're a crazy person, so everything they say, you're writing it off as, oh, this is a crazy person talking. Of course, they're speaking gibberish, and so you're pre-negating anything they would say. You're pre-invalidating them in terms of their mode. This is one example of a technique. Or you can be more private and spend more time alone. I mean, there's lots of different tricks, but basically, usually people who are serious yogis, to one degree or another, come up against this aspect of this homogenization, this inherent, socialization that humans do with each other to try to subtly force each other to conform to consensus reality. And so, so typically one has to do something about that.
Yeah, in the path of the yogi, it would seem like in conversations, it's possible to recognize that they're speaking nonsense and I'm speaking nonsense.
Sure.
It's all nonsense.
Yeah, to me, that's the easiest, most powerful way. It's just, the human mode is insanity, and I'm crazy. So of course we're sitting here speaking bullshit at each other, because that's what humans do, because they're crazy. And all of a sudden the whole issue becomes a non-issue. But you extricate yourself from the hypnotic suggestion by that, because you're invalidating. That's a way of profoundly invalidating the semantic stream. Since they're crazy and I'm crazy, everything we're saying is pre-invalidated. So it's all pretend. It's like, boy, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. You're like, yeah, bullshit, bullshit. Like, oh, bullshit, 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 bullshit. And so it doesn't carry much weight. So you're not liable to be swayed by it in much of a way, because you're pre-invalidated.
It seems like it's a chance to be there also.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Sure. You don't need to. If you're artful, you don't need to not participate in socialization. You can just be free yourself of it by not being gullible, by being intelligent, by seeing what it is. Once you get that human language is entirely inaccurate and therefore entirely has nothing to do with anything whatsoever, literally, people may as well be making blah 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 at each other for all the actual meaningfulness it has. Once you get that, then that's another very profound way to free yourself of all that. Words do not correlate to reality, period, in no way. So therefore, everything that anyone talks about is a fantasy, because words do not refer to reality. Hi, how you doing? What did you do yesterday? There is no yesterday. There is no you. There is no doing. So right away, the entire statement is semantic gibberish. And so you can answer, oh, great, God, yeah, yesterday we did this, and I went to this stupid talk, and blah, 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 And so you're spouting bullshit too, because none of that stuff exists. But you know it, so you're not trapped by it. You're transparent to it. So it comes and goes, and you're like a transparent window with the light shining through. It doesn't affect the window. Why don't we break for lunch? It's about 12:30. So why don't we come back here? It's 12:30, 1:30. Why don't we be back by around 2-ish? You know, quarter to 2, whenever, and we'll take it from there.